Coach Brian here with Northwest Elite Spirit, and today I would like to share with you my personal experience with visualization. I'll start off with a short story to kind of help you understand where I'm at. About 4 years ago, I was homeless. I was living in my car, sleeping in the woods. This was a decision I made due to being surrounded by just toxic people. I wasn't necessarily able to maintain a household on my own, and I was struggling, to pay bills and keep up with money issues. But at the same time, I was surrounded by people that I didn't think were necessarily like helping me rise up out of that, or even allowing for it, maybe even sabotaging it in a lot of ways. I tried 3 gyms, mixed martial arts gyms, which failed, and I was just around people who weren't good for me. And I had the option to stay in different places, but everywhere I looked, my friend group and my family situation was just toxicity. So I went and slept out in the woods. And while I was sleeping out in the woods, I began some visualization practices. I'm not going to say I'm a master at this because I haven't quite hit exactly on the dot, but I have become very close. And every day I live where I'm at now, I realize like little things that show me that I've done pretty well with my visualization, but I also have some work to do. So before I go to bed, I'd imagine driving up a long driveway with trees on both sides in a Dodge van. I currently have a long driveway with trees on both sides and I'm driving in a Dodge van. And when I say like not quite mastered it yet, like the Dodge van is like an old like rickety van, and I don't own the property that I'm on, but in my visualization I did own the property that I'm on. I imagine living in a 2-story house, which I do. It's split apartments though. It's an old house that was split into apartments, so there's a downstairs and upstairs, but I nailed that. Large fireplace, I have a very large fireplace, nailed that. I imagine living on 3,000 plus acres. I don't live on 3,000 plus acres, I live on 27 acres, but I'm connected to about 3,000 acres. And when I talk about that, like in my imagination, 3/4 was forest, 1/4 was prairie, and that's kind of the makeup of the area I live in. We're surrounded by forest and prairie, and we live on a small patch of prairie. I imagine apple trees, or visualized apple trees. We have apple trees, though the nicest one was cut down by the previous downstairs neighbors in order to put in an electric gate, which doesn't work. Again, not quite nailing what I was after. I imagine cherry trees. We have cherry trees. I imagine wild food. We have blackberries and thimbleberries and huckleberries and various plants. I imagine medicinal plants. We have a bunch of medicinal plants. I also visualize wild mushrooms growing in the forest near us and on our property. And we have easy accessible wild mushrooms out on the trails that we have connected to the property, and some of those wild mushrooms, even like when they're in season, open the front door and they're right there in the garden. Speaking of hunting mushrooms on the trails, so in my visualizations I imagine the 3,000 acres with running trails all through them. Well, out in this forest out here, there's just miles and miles of trails, and I actually found even more trail yesterday. So that was pretty interesting. I imagined a mountain view looking out from where I sleep out onto the mountain, and I have that here, though it's a cloudy day. And there's 3 large trees that kind of obscure the view from the house, but if you go out in the yard, you can see it a lot better. Again, not quite nailing the image or the visualization, but getting there. Imagine that we had a garden. We have plenty of garden out there. We just started doing that, really gardening this year. We have that. I imagine having animals raising livestock. We've got chickens this year. I imagine multiple buildings on my property to store equipment and resources to maintain the property, and there are multiple buildings out there. Again, I don't own them, and they're being rented out for storage, so not quite hitting the mark on that one, being that they're not mine and I'm not storing things in there to maintain the property. I imagine trees for lumber, and again, we're surrounded by forests. There's trees everywhere. Stone for building. Literally out in our yard, there's basically a quarry, and you can see where the people who've lived before and I myself have gone out and taken up rocks and used them to build certain things around the property. I visualize multiple homes for families, staff, and visitors. And again, I don't own this property, but there's 6 houses out here, and then there's an apartment below us, which is basically the number that I imagine in my head for family, staff, and visitors. I imagine an archery range. We have an archery range. I imagine a dojo. We have a dojo. And to top it all off, the kicker to all of this is that so while I was living in the woods and working, I was picking places that I thought I might want to visit or live. And when I came here, the previous tenant couldn't afford the rent, and I was already helping. Like, we tore down a house further down the driveway here and put in a new one. And I was like, well, since I'm already out here like helping, why don't I'll trade you work for rent. And that's how we managed to get this place. And I was, like I said, I was taking work at places I thought I might want to live, and I had no idea about the forest or anything like that. I just thought it was a cool place to live, a very pleasant place to live, plenty of room in the house for my kids. But so I started living here for a while, and there's these incidences or coincidences. My ex started dating somebody with the last name Purvis, and then my daughter and I, shortly after we moved in here, we got a roofing job. But not only did we do a roofing job, we tore down an old shed, and in the old shed it was so and so, same name, Purvis loves so and so. Very old thing written in this old shed. So that was 2 Purvises. Then realized that our neighbor's name was Purvis, and so I was like, okay, I like to take coincidences and make them mean something. So when somebody says when I tell somebody a story and they say, oh, that's a coincidence, I say, so what? Because I can take those coincidences and I can make them mean something. I can turn those coincidences into something, and it is magic in that way. I take these things and I make them into something. So one day I was visiting my mom, who eventually came here to pass away, and my cousin, he asked me where I'm living now, and I start telling him, and he's like, oh, that's his grandma's old house. So this is my cousin's grandma's old house. And he starts talking about the neighbors. So I go and I meet the neighbors, the Purvises, and they know me from childhood. Like, they used to hang out and party with my mom and dad and stuff like that. So there's that family connection that I had in my visualization too with the Purvises. I also imagined elk and deer coming through the yard. We have elk, we have deer, we have bear, we have a cougar, which my son and I ran into. We have coyotes, we have rabbits. So I just want to share with you that there is something to visualization, but there also is a mastery to it. I'm no master at it, but I am getting better at it. And arriving here in this place and having all of these things has strengthened my belief in the power of visualization. And so I keep doing it. I keep visualizing, and I keep having these things coming into my life through visualization. And the visualization also brings these coincidences, and then these coincidences bridge together, and I can make something out of them. So I encourage you to visualize. Try a visualization technique, 15 minutes a day in the morning or at night. I like to do it as I fall asleep. That way it kind of like segues over into my dream, and then that way I fall asleep too, not worrying about like any anxieties from the day. It's more like a excitement for the future, but in my visualization I'm in it, so it's more like an excitement for now, and then it can segue into the dreams. I do practice lucid dreaming, so I can segue and I can keep visualization practice into my dream, and it helps me wake up more confident in what I'm after, and keeps the ball rolling. So again, I encourage you to practice visualization techniques, and what I'd like you to do is practice something for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and then comment below the results that you see. Keep an eye out for coincidences too, and then turning those coincidences into something for yourself. Make them mean something for yourself, and again, comment below. Also, of course, like this video if you find the information interesting or helpful. Share this information or share this video with your friends and family who may be interested, or anybody who might be interested in visualization practice. And of course, subscribe so I can keep sharing these practices with you. Again, I'm Coach Brian Spears with Northwest Elite Spirit, and thank you.